Okay, so in the last class, we talked about diversity and what actually biodiversity mean and at what different levels this diversity is incorporated in the biological organization or the biological world. So this is one major part from where questions come. So you would like to mark this part of your textbook where they talk about the three different levels of biodiversity or diversity in general, not just in organisms, but also within um, one species among organisms. So genetic diversity is the first thing. Um, um, Rabia was there in the last class, right? Rabia, are you there, Rabia? If someone can speak up, that will be great. Because I really want this class to be more discussive due to two reasons. One, so that I don't have to speak all of it. And second, so that whatever we are studying, I'm sure that it makes sense to you. You understand. Okay, so I'll just quickly revise this part. So when we talk about diversity, it could be at multiple levels in a living system. It's not just that different species are diverse from each other. Even within a species, organisms are very diverse from each other because of their inherent genetic variation. So in this part, the first level, the genetic diversity, it's about organisms or individuals within a single species. They are also diverse at their genetic level, and that genetic diversity leads to morphological and genetic variations. They have given you an example of this Wolfia vomitoria plant that depending on where it is growing, its region where it is growing, you will find that this plant basically is a medicinal plant. So you will find that the active chemical that it secretes, reserpine, there is difference in the potency and concentration of that chemical in that plant. So that is one example of, because these plants have genetic diversity from region to region. And there are more examples that we talked about. We talked about humans. Humans are the best example because humans are there on every continent that's livable, and you will see that humans have very different um, morphologies. Morphology in the sense the characters like hair, skin color, height, build, etc., etc. So all this comes from the inherent genetic diversity, though all the humans belong to the same species. And many more examples like different varieties of rice in India and mangoes in India are also an example of genetic diversity, where the same species have a lot of variations among it. When we move from individuals and we go to species, so then we talk about species of similar kind of organisms, like species of amphibians or species of reptiles. So there we see that um, there is a species diversity again in different regions. That, for example, in Eastern Ghat and Western Ghats, you will see that the Western Ghat has a far greater number of amphibian species than the Eastern Ghats. Now, you will find similar kind of trends for other species like birds and reptiles at different uh, habitats. From species, as we go at the habitat level, which is the ecosystem that we talked about in the last class, and you will appreciate that ecosystem could be very small or ecosystem could be very huge. So we are going to talk about the standard ecosystems that we read in the textbooks, like deserts, forests, rainforests, mangrove forests, marshlands, coral reefs, etc., etc. And at the level of habitat also, we see that there is a diversity in regions. So some areas, like the country of India, has a lot more diversity at at ecosystem level than some other countries, like the countries in Middle East, where some of you currently are. So ecological diversity is very important. Often we think that if if we have deserts, like we were discussing in the last class, that's not a good thing. You know, we need more greenery all around. We need more green trees, but that's not always true, because just looking at green or greenery, then we might think that one kind of a forest will help us. That's not the case, because one type of a forest cannot have different types of species. So not all species can live in grassland, not all species can live in the wetlands, not all species can live in desert. There are species which are important and adapted to their respective habitats. So we have to save all habitats alike, okay? Not just the forests or rainforests. And then we talked about that all these ecosystems and all the diversity that's present in the ecosystem took a lot of time to establish. Millions of years of evolution established all these things. And also the fact that there is far more number of species that used to live on the planet and now are extinct than what we currently have. It tells us that none of it is static, right? So we were discussing in the last class that almost 98 to 99% of the total species that ever lived on the planet are now extinct. So what we see on the planet now is a mere fraction of what existed in totality. But the thing that you have to understand is that all of them did not and could not exist together. So some got extinct. That's why others got a chance to be dominant or come in or increase or also speciate. And we were talking about the example of mammals. So the dominance of mammals, which now we see in almost every ecosystem, the apex predators, majority of them are mammals. Whether you talk about grassland ecosystem, you talk about a desert ecosystem, you will see the best fitting organisms or the best fitting predators are mammals. Okay, but at one point of time, back in the prehistoric Earth, they were not mammals; they were reptiles, the dinosaurs that we know of, and uh, descendants of sauropsids. So we studied about sauropsids and that whole branch that gave rise to alligators, crocodiles, lizards, dinosaurs, everything in evolution. Remember? And remember that, people?
Yeah.
Yeah. And only when reptiles were doomed, the big reptiles were doomed, mammals got a chance because they could survive because of they being warm-blooded. Till reptiles were there, their dominance was there. Mammals were mostly nocturnal, and it makes sense because during the day it was reptiles that will roam around and hunt. So they would like to live in burrows and mostly be nocturnal. And that still it holds true, and that behavior is conserved in many mammals. For example, mouse. So mouse is the mammalian model system on which most of our studies are based when we talk about.
So,
Yes, Iram.
so is there any limitation of uh, natural selection?
Well, limitation of natural selection. Uh, the limit. It's a good question. So limitation in what sense?
So,
Like natural.
so
Yeah.
there was a question in our exam, state two limitations of natural selection, and I was thinking hard. I couldn't think of anything. Like, is there written in the reader, or is it mentioned?
So the chapter evolution talks about a few limitations, but indirectly. Uh, so basically, if you you have to ask the question in what sense. So first is natural selection will only work, like the limitation could be mechanistic. For example, what it takes for natural selection to work. So one of the limitation is if you do not have genetic variation, or if there is a lack of a broader variation pool, then natural selection will not select the best because the best is not available. So for the fittest, like when we say that natural selection selects the best, we also have to understand that given the best should be there, but what if the best is not there? What if the variation is not available? So the best organism to, let's say, be selected could have been with these features, but those features are not present because of limited variation, because of limited sexual reproduction that happened. So one of the limitation is it requires a huge a pool of natural variation among organisms. So that is one thing that you can think of. And the other is, as a whole, the theory could not explain the importance of genetic variation in the course of evolution. So theory of natural, so if the question was about the theory of natural selection that Darwin gave, then you can write these
Yeah,
two limitations. Was it about the theory of natural
theory
selection?
of natural selection.
Oh, okay, cool. Then there are many limitations because the theory given by Darwin is very old, and Darwin, of course, uh, didn't and couldn't know everything back then because Darwin has no idea about genes and alleles and how are they working, mechanisms of genes and alleles. So the theory had a lot of loopholes, not loopholes I'll say, but shortcomings that now we have figured out and we have kind of fixed it. So we call it the neo-Darwinian theory of natural selection nowadays. But that theory had two major limitations. One is on the basis of variation, you could not clearly distinguish between organisms in a species and a group of organisms which belong to two different species. So according to Darwinian theory of natural selection, two organisms which have been selected for very different environments, like the finches themselves he talked about, he could say that they all came from the same ancestor that was seed eating, right? But he could not comment on the fact that whether for sure they are all different species now or they are the subspecies of the same species. So according to natural theory of natural selection given by Darwin, if you would have told him that there are 50,000 different varieties of rice, just by that theory, you would not be able to say whether all of these belong to the same species or they are different varieties in the same species, because no information or no contemplation of genetic diversity was there. It was mostly morphological based. You understand? You see some differences and you say that, okay, this has happened because of natural selection. Does it make sense?
Yes.
And second is it could not, as I said, it could not explain the importance of genetic variation in evolution. So he said that evolution is driven by natural selection, but how mechanistically, he couldn't say anything about that. Again, because he had no knowledge about how genes are functioning.
So that
And
was
third,
given in Hardy Weinberg's principle, right?
Exactly. That was given by Hardy-Weinberg principle, and that was also later on when people started studying genetics, like Mendel and other people. So sorry, Morgan, Thomas Hunt Morgan on Drosophila and Seymour Benzer. Then the theory got more and more evidence to be based on. Third, the theory of natural selection also do not explicitly can explain phenomena like mimicry, where one organism mimics to look like other organism just for its fitness and adaptation, right? So all these were short listings of limitations of theory of natural selection.
Saltation could also come.
Saltation, yes, because he had no major idea about mutations. I think he had ideas about mutation. He has written in Origin of Species also, he talks about sudden changes, but he could not incorporate how mutation drives evolution along with natural selection. So because natural selection is slow and gradual, right? And mutation, which you are calling as saltation, is a single generation large change, right? So that's something that Darwin could not, the theory of Darwin could not explain, right? But now when we study neo-Darwinian theory, we have accommodated these things because we understand the mechanism, how saltation works and how natural selection works. Okay, so the theory had
Yeah.
these limitations, but the process of natural selection itself has no limitation except for the limitation that it requires a larger pool of variation to choose from. Okay, does that make sense, Iram?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, anything else you want to discuss?
No.
Okay, so connecting to that, um, we were talking about how the biodiversity has been very dynamic since the dawn of life on planet Earth. And that brought us to this figure, which I think Rabia and Mariam has already done as an assignment in the last class. But since Iram was not there, Parker, are you there? Would you can you speak up, or Rabia? Rabia or Parker, anyone can speak up.
Yes.
Yes, Parker, great, thank you. So would you like to just summarize for Iram what we did and what we discussed with this figure, like what I asked you to do, and you can also talk about your points, and if you remember Rabia's points on this. So what did we understand from this global biodiversity representation pie chart? Just the main key points. If you'll miss something, I'll pitch in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in vertebrates, it is noticed that the insects are more than other animal groups, crustaceans and mollusks. And in vertebrates, it's seen that fishes, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians are more than fishes. Sorry, are less than fishes. Fishes is like in majority, like in the world, it from this pie chart it can be seen that in the world fishes are more in number than mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians. Like for example, if there are 50 mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, the other 50 will be fishes. And in plants, in last class, sir, you mentioned that uh, fungi is not a plant. So yeah, but still it's there in the pie chart.
Yeah, correct. And you talked about number of fishes. So what is this number? Is it the every fish counted in the ocean or in the river, or number of what? Is it number of individual fish, or is it the number of species of different fish?
Number of species. I just
Species,
gave an
right?
example.
Yeah, right. So And, you rightly pointed out that almost half of all the vertebrates, almost half of all the species of vertebrates are fish. Okay, and this also kind of tells you that in the water, when life, as they say, that life evolved first in the water and then it came to land. So fish has been around for very long, more than, of course, more than some of the mammals or birds or reptiles or amphibians that are dependent on land as well, right? And fungi, we all know it's not a plant, neither an animal, but this graph just puts it in that pie chart to give you a context. And we also talked about some questions that come on this pie chart. Remember, Parker, about lichens and geosperms? Do you remember those questions? So the why are lichens a mere fraction of all the plant species present? So lichens um, also truly are not plants, right? They are a symbiotic relationship between plants called algae and fungi. But why are they so less? Why they don't have species diversity like others? Parker?
So,
Yes, Iram.
so what are crustaceans?
Crustaceans are organisms in water, mostly in water, which have a shell. So shelled organisms of the water, like crabs, lobsters, prawns, they are all crustaceans. You must have studied about this in class 11th, right? Remember classification chapter? And I also connected dots from this pie chart that Parker missed. The point narrowly is that insects, the overwhelming number of species that insects have, which is more than three-fourths of the total invertebrates, it also tells us that what we studied in class 11th in classification chapter, saying that phylum Arthropoda is the biggest phylum in kingdom Animalia. Remember that? The largest phylum.
Yeah, in animal kingdom.
Yes. So in animal kingdom, insects are the most diverse phylum, Arthropoda. But Arthropoda does not only contain insects, it also contains spiders, right, which are not insects. And the second largest was mollusk. We also studied that. And you can also clearly see from this pie chart that the global representation of their species diversity also suggests the same trend, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the question why lichens are very, very narrow in their species diversity, can you think of any reason why lichens are so less?
So these lichens are the ones we studied in evolution, right? In industrial
Yes,
mechanism and all this one. Like,
exactly. Yes, yes, right. So one of the reason that lichen diversity is decreasing and will continue to decrease is that lichens are natural indicators of pollution. So they don't grow in regions which are polluted, right? That was the case during industrial melanization. The lichens which were growing on the tree barks, keeping the barks more whitish, the lichens were dead because of increasing pollution and soot deposited on these barks, making the tree barks more darker, right? That was industrial melanization. And suddenly, in a span of around 50 to 60 years, we could see that dark winged moths were naturally selected over white winged moths because the barks on which they used to live turned dark these light colored lichens were not present anymore. And also the soot deposited. So dark winged moths were selected. Predators could not find them, but could find the white winged moths easily. Before industrialization, it was opposite. The light winged moths were difficult to find because they could blend in with this light colored lichens on the bark, but the dark winged moths could not. So that was a reversal of natural selection that we saw, right? Iram, Rabia, make sense? Yep, give me a thumbs up if it makes sense to you. Okay, perfect. Now, some facts in this paragraph that you should just read. I gave you this homework to read about it. And the facts are that India is a biodiversity hotspot. And it says that since India has only 2.4% of the world's land area, it has around 8% of the global species diversity, which is impressive. Okay. And India also is rich in ecological diversity because it has almost everything: desert, grasslands, alluvial plains, plateaus, mountains, uh, also marshes, mangroves, all beaches, everything. So that makes India very rich in its ecological diversity as well. Now, this is where we finished. After discussing all of this concept, we had to understand the pattern. And this is a long question that comes when it comes. And small, short one marker questions often comes in entrances from this part. So when I say pattern of biodiversity, what we mean is that, is this biodiversity random? Like, is it randomly, um, like you see a forest somewhere and one forest will have lots of different organisms and the other forest will not? Or is it based on certain logic, some concepts or some reasons that are followed on the planet? So the patterns of biodiversity are set by majorly two things. One is the latitudinal gradient. So what is a latitude? You know about latitude, right, Hiram? What is a latitude? Latitude, longitude. Am I audible?
Something related with geography.
Yes, right. That's correct. It's so, but you remember these are imaginary lines that we have drawn across the earth and helps us to make a coordinate system, right? If you have to if you have to mm, locate any point on planet Earth, basically you can just give the coordinates. You remember the coordinates? Some things, something north, something south, east, west. So these are numbers and coordinates which exactly define what is your location. So if you go to your GPS in your mobile phones, wherever you are standing, you just look at the coordinates. It will give you exact coordinate of the place you are standing or your mobile is present. And that will be unique. No, there can't be same coordinates for two different places on Earth. So we kind of make a web around Earth. So longitudes are the line that runs vertically long from pole to pole. So it starts from South Pole and ends at North Pole. So if you're drawing lines from pole to pole, they are longitudes. If you're drawing lines from equator to poles, like circular lines, so equator, equator is also imaginary line, right? So we call equator as 0 because that's the imaginary line that runs through the center. Imagine the center of that sphere, and then we have latitudes going away from equator towards the North Pole and away from equator towards the South Pole. So that is called the latitudinal gradient. Now, what do we mean by it? You must have studied in geography that you can divide uh, all the regions on Earth into certain zones. The polar zone, remember that? What is the polar zone? Which is near the South Pole or the North Pole. Then you have the temperate zone and the tropical zone. Do you remember these words?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is temperate zone?
It is just after the pole.
It is away enough. Yeah, go ahead, Iram. No worries. Don't worry much about the noise or background thing. It's all fine. What is a temperate zone? Is it closer to equator or closer to poles?
It is closer to pole.
Yeah, it is closer to poles, but not. It doesn't also come under the polar region, so it's not all what do you say, frozen, right? But it has lower temperature as compared to the equator, right? So that's the temperate zone in which most of our European countries come in, and the South American, sorry, North American states come in. So that's the temperate zone. And what is the tropical zone?
This one is closer to the equator.
Yeah. So between equator and the temperate region, in between is the tropical region. So tropical region ends at equator on both sides. So where do you think there is greater um, stability in terms of weather or climate? Which climate do you think, temperate, polar, or tropical, is good for organisms to not just live but to also thrive? So in general, the
Tropical.
trend is yes, right. So in general, the trend is that the diversity of species, it decreases as we move away from equator and as we go towards the pole. So if you go towards the pole, towards the southern pole, near the Antarctica, you won't find much uh, small organisms. So this is also a question that comes in biology. It's not related to this chapter, but you should know that it's a very famous question, that why do you find more big and fluffy organisms towards the pole and you don't find small birds or smaller mammals or reptiles? Of course, reptiles you can't find towards the pole because you can give a simple answer. They are cold-blooded. They will die in the poles. But you also don't find small organisms, small mammals. Why? Any idea? Any logic?
Mammals.
Yeah, anything. Birds, mammals. Do you find anything small in the polar regions? Name organisms that you find in polar regions. Towards the in the South Pole, you will find penguins, right? Near Antarctica.
Yeah.
Penguins are
Penguins,
also
polar
penguins, polar bears, and
sea.
seal, walrus, right? Whales, right? And so all these, do you think they are small organisms or they are big organisms?
They're big.
They're big. Do you find mouse, rabbits, sparrows, squirrels? Why not?
No.
Why not? What can you think of as a reason? And whatever you will think of as a reason, if it's logically correct, that will be the true reason. True reason. And this is a genuine question question that comes. What is the most important thing an organism has to do if an organism is living in the poles?
Sorry, sir?
Sorry?
No, I didn't hear you. Could you repeat that?
Yeah. What is the most important thing or activity that an organism has to do if the organism is living in the poles or near the polar region? To conserve body heat, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will die because of cold. Then the environment is freezing, your enzymes won't work. If your cells freeze, your heart, your blood, your cells won't have energy if you freeze, right? Metabolically, you will become inactive. Metabolism is one of the most important life processes. So every organism, regardless of where they are living, has to maintain body heat, right? That's why, in the first place, reptiles cannot be found in the poles because they are cold blooded and poles don't see sunlight for months. So, of course, they're going to die. Mammals do live, birds also live. So, it's mostly birds and mammals because they can regulate their body temperature. They are warm blooded organisms. And they are also big in size because if an organism is bigger in size, then the ratio to the volume to surface area is it's like it has more volume to the surface area, right? But if you are small organism, your surface area is more. So surface area to volume ratio increases if you are small. You understand? And heat radiates out from all the surface of the body. So if it is a small, tiny bird, if it's a small bird, then the size of that small bird, imagine a sparrow in poles. The sparrow will lose all the body heat very, very quickly. You understand? And would not be able to, through its metabolism, maintain its body temperature. But a big, huge organism can have a lot of fat stored in the body, and the surface area, the loss through the surface area, will be less than what it can conserve in its body. So that's why it's just like getting lots and lots of fat deposited. So when you see seals and polar bears walking on ice, you must be thinking that don't they feel cold? Actually, they don't, to an extent where human will feel. So if you keep a human in place of a polar bear, the human will die of hypothermia because on our body is directly exposed to the cold. But for a polar bear or for seal, there are layers of fur and then fat that prevent their vital organs from coming in contact with the cold. Does that make sense? So the scientific reason is the body surface to the body volume ratio increases when the size of the organism decreases. Does it make sense, Iram, Parker, and Rabia?
Yes.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up if it makes sense and write it down. Okay. Cool. So moving forward, so latitudes or these zones play a very major role in defining or patterning this biodiversity as a whole. So as I told you, in general, the trend is species diversity decrease as we move away from equator and go towards the pole. Okay. And tropics, the tropical zone, it has more species than both the temperate and the polar regions combined. Okay, so tropical area is the heaven, safe heaven for organisms, and there is a reason why it has more species. So for speciation to happen, what is required? What do we need for species to bifurcate into more species? Tell me, does it happen overnight? Can one species become
Adaptation.
two species? Yeah, right. The answer is natural selection. And for natural selection to happen, what is required? For any selection to happen, what is required?
Nature.
Nature. That's fine. But on what basis will you select?
How resilient you are.
Come again, come again. On what basis?
How resilient you are, the
Yeah, but
organism.
right. But how will you test that resilience? What will test that resilience? Everything was fine. A species was living very fine for 10,000 years. Then all of a sudden, why are you selecting? What is required for selection? What will be required for your selection into medical colleges? It works the same
Marks.
way, right? A selection criteria, correct? And for that selection criteria, you need a selection pressure. Something has to be there that organisms has to go through that pushes the organism towards selection, right? So that something is called a selection stress or selection pressure. Not a very positive term, I believe. And that's why I also believe that all sorts of competitiveness in education is also not very positive thing, but it is mandatory thing, right? That is the only way it can work. The whole system can work, but do not take it unnecessarily in your heads that this is what it is. If it is not this, it's nothing. It's not true. It's a system that we have developed, and there are many ways. Organisms often evade from the selection pressure and migrate. So remember, be like migratory organisms. If you cannot hold on to the pressure, that's very, very mandatory for selection. Just migrate. Stocks do that, and those are the most successful organisms. So nature has all possible ways, but we just mostly focus on, you know, selections, uh, which I think limits a lot of human intelligence and human cognition. Of course, preparing for selection is the first thing. Every organism does that, and those who flourish gets the best of the rewards. So holds true for you as well. So there has to be a selection pressure, and selection pressure cannot just come on one day. It has to be introduced gradually and slowly. That's how competition works. Uh, Natural selection works. So the problem with students, why they fail during selection criteria or selection events, is that they do not learn from the theory of natural selection. If you want to be selected 1 year down the line, you have to start making changes now. Okay. So if any organism is not making changes in its genome for global warming, one day when the temperature will reach 2 degrees high, they won't be just getting selected overnight. They will all die. But organisms which over generations generation after generation after generation are getting little more resilient, little more resilient, little more resilient. So it's like drop by drop, you fill it, the selection criteria. Similarly, you cannot remember everything overnight. So it never works. You know, one night, one night heist never works for exams. It, even if it might, you should not think that that is the optimum way. So there are parallels in both. Every organism needs time. Every species needs time to evolve and to go through a speciation event and then speciate or become two different species. Now, this time frame is very, very long when it comes to speciation through natural selection. This time frame is millions of years sometimes. Okay. Temperate regions cannot give a stable million of years to the species often. Why? Because temperate regions, they are subjected to sudden glaciation events. Like suddenly there will be a very cold winter and everything will freeze, and then sometime the temperature will rise and the winter will not be that cold. So there is lots of uh, fluctuations that happen in the temperate regions. Okay, but in the tropical regions, if you'll see overall, the environment stays relatively more stable. So if there are grasslands, that's why you don't find grasslands in temperate regions. You won't find grasslands in the northern countries of the Europe. But you will find grasslands in tropical, and grasslands stay as a grassland, like in Africa or in India, or in the southern states of US, like grasslands for millions of years. And that gives organisms an opportunity to accumulate those small changes over time and become diversified as different species. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are two reasons. Write down this question. This question comes in entrance. And this is the question. It's there in the books also only. Can you see what I have marked in blue? I'm not sure if you can. Yeah, it's highlighted in yellow. What is special about the tropics that might account for their greater biological diversity? Written the question, everyone?
Yes.
And there are two reasons for it that we discussed. One is this point A. Sorry, that speciation requires time, and tropical regions can give relatively longer undisturbed periods to organisms than temperate region. First, make sense? And the second reason is that tropical environments are less seasonal. When I say seasonal, it's not like there are no seasons in the tropics. Of course, there are seasons in the tropics, and but sometimes you will not see a very stark, sudden, steep change in the seasons. You know, like it is very, very um, distinctly differentiated in temperate regions. What is summer and how is autumn different from summer, and how is winter or fall different from autumn, and then how is spring different from the fall. They are very, very distinct colors of these regions that you can seasons that you can see. In tropical environments, sometimes you won't even realize that, oh, it's a very slow process by which summers turns into rains, or then winters, and then again you will see rain and summers coming up. So the environment is less seasonal and more constant and predictable. You can predict tropical environments more than temperate environment. And this is very important for speciation. So this is the second reason. Make sense? Hiram and Parker?
Yes.
And then the third is just a sub part of the second only, but still you can write it separately, that there is more solar energy available in the tropics. Of course, because you see sun more in the tropics than in the temperate and polar areas. And since we have studied in the last chapter, which was ecosystem, that how does energy is passed on or it moves, flow of energy happens from one trophic level to another. And for any ecosystem to survive and flourish, it has to be constantly flushed in with energy. And if there is more solar energy, producers will produce more of starch, and that will pass on to consumers better. Make sense, Parker and Hiro? So these are the three reasons why tropics have much greater biological diversity than the temperate and polar, of course. Okay, and the second reason, so first was latitudinal gradients. So this sets, or this decides the patterns of biodiversity. The other thing that decides the pattern of biodiversity is the species area relationships. Now, this is a mathematical model, a mathematical concept, which was given by Alexander von Humboldt. I think it's yes. And what he said was that if you go to a jungle or a forest, okay, and you start observing the species diversity, which he uh, denotes as species richness. So you can see this graph, right? On the y-axis is species richness, and on the x-axis is the area of that forest or of that ecosystem that you are studying. Now, don't get confused by the line. Both the lines tell you the same concept. It's just the red line is it's linearized version. When we say linearized, you know that if you have to linearize anything in mathematics, you have to convert it into a logarithmic scale. You know about log, right? So if you put log on both the sides, the log scale, which is called, it linearizes that relationship. But look at the blue line. So what he said, before I explain you what Alexander Humboldt said, just by looking at this blue line, can you tell me something about what this graph is trying to tell you? Who will go ahead? Let's see how much you understand the context. And I'm sure you do understand the context. It's just the hesitation in students in school ecosystem. We always want right answers from our students. But someone has to listen to all the wrong answers as well, is what I believe as a teacher. You know? But no one wants to listen to the wrong answers. Yes, go ahead. Anyone would like to try? Even if it is absurdly wrong, I'll appreciate it. Don't worry. What do you think is happening? You just see a line which is blue, it's curving. There are two axes. Without knowing anything, can you explain me anything about it? Parker, would you like to go? Don't hesitate. Come on, people. This is the whole point of my classrooms.
Sir, 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead, Parker. I think Iram and Parker both unmuted. Yes, Parker, first you. Okay, Iram, you. Can you go ahead, Iram? Just try, don't worry.
So this says that as the area increases, the
Mhm.
richness will also increase. So it's like it's starting and then it goes on to the right hand side, means it's increasing probably. So they're like directly proportional, area and species richness.
Yeah, you're right. It is to, so in which direction does species richness increase? In the upward direction, right? As when the y-axis increases, the species richness increases, correct? And when the x-axis increases, the area increases. So you're right. If I start from this point, can you all see my cursor? Iram, Parker, and Rabia.
Yes.
Yeah. So if I start at this point, it says that this particular area, which is very less, the species richness is very less. So if I have sampled a very less area of a huge jungle, of course I will get very less species richness. Makes sense. As I'm going with, in the beginning, with less increase in area, I see more increase in species richness, correct? When I come to this point where my cursor is, I have moved more on the y-axis than I have on the x-axis. Make sense? So which means as area increased, species richness also increased, slightly more than the area itself. So it is directly proportional, but the relationship is not linear. And as I keep going, the same trend is happening. Area increase, species richness increase, area increase. Uh-oh, but what happened here? Now I am increasing. I'm just moving in the x direction. Area is constantly increasing, but what is happening to species richness? Is it going any further? No. Here, you almost don't see any increase in the y-axis. It is getting static and stable with y-axis. If I just extrapolate this line forward, you will see that it is only increasing in the x-axis. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Don't look at the red line. That will confuse you. It is just a log scale of the same relationship. So I'll talk about it later. Look at the blue line. After one point of time, after one area, one given area, we just see increase in area, but we do not see increase in species richness, isn't it? Hiram, Parker, and Rabia, right? So the species area relationship tells us that when Alexander von Humboldt was doing this, he was a naturalist. So when he was doing these observations, he realized that within a region, species richness increases with increasing the explored area, but only up to a limit. Okay. And in fact, he figured out that the relation between species richness and area for a wide variety of organisms is a rectangular hyperbola. What is a rectangular hyperbola? This blue line. If you keep going with this blue line, you will see that it will make a rectangle, right? Like this. So it is a rectangular hyperbola, this blue line. And to to make this graph like straight line, you just can simply do a simply represent it on a logarithmic scale. So first, let's understand what this graph says. It gives you a formula called S is equal to CA raised to power Z, right? Now the C here is the y-intercept. Okay, wherever you intercept y, which means C is equal to the intercept at y. S is the species richness. So you are defining species richness. So species richness is equal to y-intercept multiplied by area raised to the power z, which is called slope of the line, right? Now you can see that the slope, you know what is the slope of the line mathematically? You
Yes.
all, how many of you have mathematics with you in your 11th and 12th also? None. So you all of you had mathematics till class 10th?
Yes.
Okay, that will suffice. In fact, I also had mathematics in the CBSE board only till my class 10th. Okay, I later on realized that it would have been great if I would have mathematics in 11th, 12th, which I did not realize back then, but it's never too late. So I picked up, and if I could, you all could for sure. So, but just by class 10th, going by class 10th, you know the slope, right? So if
So what
I
did you
ask
ask?
you, sorry, come again, Iram?
So what did you ask? I didn't hear it. Like something about maths. So can you
Yeah,
hear me?
yes, I can hear
So
you.
you
I
asked
think,
something about maths.
yeah, you could not hear me. I was asking how many of you have mathematics in your 11th and 12th?
Yes, sir, I have.
You have, great. So you are already a step ahead of me, like back in my time. So I think me, Parker, and Rabia had mathematics just till class 10. So it makes things easier if you have mathematics in class 11th and 12th for later on, even if you want to become a doctor, a scientist, researcher, anything. Maths is very integrated nowadays. Okay, cool. So, but to understand this, you just need mathematics till class 10th only. You know what is the slope of a line. So if I draw a line, so if I forget about which line is explaining which formula, just look at the red line. The slope of the red line is constant and same at every point on the line. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? But the slope of the line on the blue line, so if I put a point here where my cursor is currently versus a point here versus a point at the end, at all these three locations, start, end, and in the middle, the slope will be same or different?
Different.
Different. And since in the formula there is the z is the slope of the line, also known as regression coefficient, it's better to convert this formula into a log scale. So that will log, it will make it a straight line, a linear line. So log s is equal to log c. It is the same formula. S is equal to c into a raised to power z. So log s is equal to log c plus. So this power comes down. I think Iram must be remembering it better. So when you convert it into a
Yes,
logarithmic
that's it.
scale, the power comes down and adds up. So z into log a, right?
Yes.
So this makes things easier for us. So that's what they
So,
did. Yes, Iram.
so I have a question. So this
Mhm.
definition states that as the area increases, the species richness will increase up to a limit, but after that, it just stops, right?
Mhm.
But how is that possible? Like, if I give you an example of tropical rainforest, as
Mhm.
we go further ahead, it just keeps on increasing, right? How can it just stop?
Right. So that's what everyone thought back then, that if you will keep exploring more and more areas, you will keep finding more and more species richness. But it turned out that what we keep finding more is the individuals of the same species rather than new species. And what you are talking about is at a human scale. If you go to Amazon forest, we still find new species in Amazon forest because we have not explored the forest, even half of it. But even
Mhm.
if someday we are done with exploring the whole Amazon rainforest, we will realize, according to Humboldt's principle, if that's true, that even in that place, the species richness will increase up till some area. So we are currently here. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, sir.
In exploring the forests, let's say we are currently here. So that's what Iram is saying. If I keep on increasing area, I will see more and more species, more and more species. We have one day we will reach this point. And then after that, the amount of area that you will increase, that you will sample, you will not find more different kind of species, but you will find more individuals of the same species that you already know. So species richness or species diversity will decrease. Okay, you understand?
Species richness will imply that the amount of species, right? Rather the different amount of species, it implicates the more number of species that are present.
Right, more number of species, like more diversity. If you're talking about birds, a lot of different species of birds is the richness, and all
Mm.
of them are present in the same area. So richness comes from the fact that it is area centric. It's bounded by area. So if I say that there are 10 different species of birds in 10 kilometer square, and there are 10 different species of bird in 1 kilometer square, so the number stays the same of the number of species of the bird, right? But if I ask you where the richness was more, you will say in the second case, where I found 10 different species in 1 kilometer square of area. In that area, the species richness was more, whereas the other area that I sampled, where in 10 kilometer square, I found 10 species. Do you understand?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So that's what Humboldt says, that as you go on increasing the area that you are sampling, the richness comes to a hold, a static stop. And the evidence for that was that he figured out that for a variety of organisms like plants, birds, bats, and even fish, every time when you plot this graph of species richness versus area, you get this blue line, which is a rectangular hyperbola. And it tells you that after one point of time, no matter how much you increase the area, the richness of the species will come to a hold, right?
Yeah.
So, and after that was given, people started doing all these studies in a lot of places. And if you are taking a smaller area in account, which means you are somewhere here on the graph, you will have more richness. So if I say uh, uh, one forest versus the other, we are talking about high richness. But as I increase the area and I talk about the richness of plant species in Great Britain versus um, some other state in India or some state in US, then you will realize that as you keep making the area bigger and bigger and bigger, the z value, which is the slope of the line or the regression coefficient, it ranges in a very small uh, gradient. It ranges in a very small pin. So, like they say here, uh, uh, Iram, would you like to read this paragraph that I have highlighted in blue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ecologists have discovered that the value of Z lies in the range of zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.2, regardless of the taxonomic group or the region. Whether it is the plants in Britain, birds in California, or mollusks in New York State, the slope of the regression lines are amazingly similar. But if you analyze the species area relationship among very large areas like the entire continent, you will um you will
Find.
you will find you will find that the slope of the line to be much steeper. Z value is in the range of 0.6 to 1.2. For example, for frugivorous fruit-eating birds and mammals in the tropical forest of different continents, the slope is found to be 1.15.
Yes. Now let's try to understand what it. The slope is more. The line will happen. The line will be more blue like or red like.
Sir, sir, your
Yep.
voice is cracking.
Yes,
Okay,
sir,
sorry.
it's cracking.
1 second. Okay, is it any better now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So I was asking, if I increase the value of slope, okay, z value, so the line, will it be more blue like or red like?
Red like?
Yeah, first of all, red like, you understand. So let's say this red line has a z value of 0.5. Now, if I make a line with z value of 1.2, that red line will be much steeper, right? It will go something like this. Can you see my cursor moving?
Yep.
Yes.
So this means the line became more steeper. And if the value is 1.5, it is even steeper like this. And what does a steeper line means? A steeper line means that with small increase in area, you will see more increase in richness, right?
Yes.
So as we keep sampling more and more and more and more area, the z value increases. So they said if you're only talking about plants in Britain versus birds in California, these are two small areas as compared to the planet itself. So their lines will be similar. It does not matter whether you are studying birds, you are studying plants, you are studying whatever you are studying, you will find that their regression line is very, very similar if the area is constant and small. But if you study entire continent like Asia versus Africa, you will see that the slope of the line will be much steeper. Okay. So what do steeper slopes mean in this context? Steeper slope means that with just a
Smaller
small
area, more richness.
yeah, with just increasing the area a little bit, we got a lot of species, and so richness will increase suddenly. And if it is a sudden increase in richness, it will, after one point of time, it will just settle, because there is a limit how many species you can find, right? We can, it's not like even in Amazon, like I said, we are somewhere here. So we are in a phase where every week we find a new species in Amazon. But that is only because we have sampled only a small part of Amazon. Even Amazon has a limit. You cannot find unlimited species in Amazon, can you? No, right?
No, sir.
Yes. So there's a limit to how many species you can find. So that also shapes the biodiversity. So first was latitudinal gradients, very simple explanation for that. That speciation requires a lot of time. Tropical regions can give that time, temperate regions cannot, because they have very frequent glaciations that happened in the past. Whereas tropics remained untouched, undisturbed for millions of years. Second reason, that tropical environment is less fluctuating, less seasonal, and more predictable. So it's good for species diversity, because if there is more fluctuations, then some species will die because they won't be able to tolerate that fluctuation. Other will survive. So again, diversity will come down. But if there is less fluctuation, then over the time, more and more species that will be formed will stay stable and will not quickly die. So there will be more diversity. And third, simple, more sunlight in the tropics, so more energy with the producers, more energy they fix, more energy goes to consumers, and their number increases. Their reproduction is better. So this was first reason. Second is species area relationship, which is a mathematical concept given by Alexander von Humboldt. And he said that the richness of species increases with increase in explored area, but up to a limit. And after that, it becomes static. And this is explained by this formula S, which is species richness, is equal to C, which is um, intercept of the y line multiplied by a raised to power z. A is area, z is the regression coefficient. And you just remember that as we keep on increasing the area that we are studying, the z value gets bigger and bigger, and the slope of the line becomes more steeper. So we're talking about this log scale slope here. Okay. Are these two things clear? These
Yes,
were the major concepts in this chapter. If that's clear, then we are ready to we are good to go with finalizing this chapter. Like there is still some part left of conservation, but is this part clear? This is the part
yes,
which had concepts. Please ask me any questions. I allow you 2 minutes to go through both of these things, both the points. Hmm. No doubts? Okay. Now let's move towards understanding. Now we understand that there is biodiversity, how it is set, at what levels it is set, and what are the reasons that pattern this biodiversity. Now the next question is, why is biodiversity important? So if in an ecosystem there is more species diversity, why is it important? Does it have any importance? Iram, what do you think?
Yes, actually,
Yeah.
because
So what? Yeah. Because
if there is one species dominating or in the large number, if there's no diversity, then there would be a lot of competition for food. So maybe
okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair point. And what will happen? But do
yeah,
you think competition decreases if there is species diversity?
yes, I agree
Okay.
that.
Okay.
So
And
like
how?
if there is diversity, then probably
It's easy to
competition.
make a food web, you are saying.
Yes,
So every
yeah,
consumer has more options. So if there is more plant diversity, the herbivorous organisms will have more options to choose from. But if there is only one kind of grass or tree growing in that jungle, that all of them, all the herbivorous will just go to that option, right?
yes.
You're right. You're perfectly correct. But let me try to counter question you on this point. Why is it a problem? You can still have one species dominating and have a large number of it. So even if there is one option available to herbivorous, what if the plant has 10 times more number of individuals? We can solve the problem of competition like that by increasing the individual number. Yes or not?
Okay, so I didn't get this one.
So your point was that if there is only one species, let's imagine there are
Mm,
multiple species of deer in a jungle, but just one predominant species of grass, right?
yes.
So you are saying that for all these different species of deer, there is more competition for food because there is only one
Yeah.
food available. Now
Yes.
I am saying let there be just one food, one type of food, but increase the number of that. So there is only one type of grass, but it is 10 times more in number. Individual grasses are more growing faster because the whole jungle is theirs to grow and flourish. Can't
Mm.
we get rid of the competition problem here by increasing the number?
Yeah,
Nature.
that could work.
Yeah, nature must have thought of it, but still it didn't work. That's why we have biodiversity. So can you think you're thinking in the right direction, but what is the problem with just having few species,
So they would actually increase in number, and so like,
right? They will increase in number, and their increasing in number will solve the problem. But clearly, something else is happening because of which this problem is still a problem, and the only solution is diversity. If diversity was not the only solution, we would not have seen so much diverse organisms on the planet, right?
yeah.
You would have seen just one type of deer, one type of lion or tiger, one type of grass, and the creator's world is complete, very beautiful set. But that's not the solution, it seems like.
It's because of
The
the environmental factors also.
yes, great. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What happens? What happens? Yes, you're going in the right direction. What is the risk
Uh,
with having just it's like you're putting all your eggs in the same basket. So lots and lots of grass, but all of the same species. What is the risk with that? The risk is if anything goes wrong for that species in natural selection, or if any disease erupts, then
then the grass will be more in number, and
the species is gone. If you
yeah.
just rely on very few number of species to make a food chain, and if that species somehow could not survive, the whole hierarchy just crumbles, right?
Yes. Okay.
So what we need is stability. For any biological community to exist as an ecosystem and survive, there has to be more stability. And when we talk about a stable community should have the capability to produce equal amount of like to show equal amount of productivity from year to year, right? So if there are too many disturbances, like one season there are too many grasses, the next season all the grasses are dried up, do you think that this kind of fluctuation will help a deer community to survive?
No.
No. And if the deer community does not survive, the herbivorous community does not survive. So one season they are having lots of kids, the next season, because of hunger, all of them are dying. So do you think that will help the predators to survive?
No.
No. So to have a stable ecosystem, annual productivity has to be more or less constant. Of course, there will be variations, but those variations should not be so much that it affects the whole stability. Correct?
Yeah.
And to be able to do so, the community should be resilient. Even if there is a disturbance that's about to come, the community, whether it is the herbivorous, the producers, the consumers, they should be able to find ways to tackle it, right?
Yeah.
And third thing is, it should also be able to uh, it should also be able to tackle the invasion by any foreign species if it comes, because that is also related directly to the survival, right? If all of a sudden a foreign species which was not a part of that jungle comes in that jungle, then and if it starts flourishing itself, that has been a problem with many ecosystems that humans are doing now. So, when India started importing wheat from United States, along with wheat came a weed, WEED,
Mm.
unwanted plant called Parthenium. It's called carrot grass.
Podcast. Yeah.
And today it has invaded a lot of our ecosystem. You go to any park in India, you will find Parthenium grass growing with the normal native grasses. It's not our own. It came from a region um, where you know it was growing natively, and then it came to a tropical region where it found, oh, this is a very safe haven. Everything is good. There is a lot of water. The temperature is good. So they started growing so much that it started affecting the native population. The same thing happened with the in the case of Bengal terror. Remember that?
Bengal?
Bengal terror. Have you heard of Bengal terror?
No.
It's in your NCRT only. So a plant, um, what was the name of the plant? Britishers brought that plant of water lily to because they used to have it in Britain. I'm forgetting the water hyacinth. You remember the plant water hyacinth?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just search for water hyacinth. It's a water lily. It's very beautiful, and Britishers used to have it for the decoration of um, their ponds. Okay, and then they brought it with them to Bengal, Kolkata, and they started having it in the ponds there. But what they didn't know is that from a temperate region where its growth was limited by factors like temperature, humidity, nutrients availability in the water, etc., when it came to a tropical region like India, where the nutrient availability was more, temperature was more stable, and there was ample opportunity to grow, that water hyacinth just took over the whole pond, and it formed a thick layer over the whole pond, and every life that was submerged in the water, that water hyacinth did not allow sunlight to reach that, so all the fish died, all the plants, submerged plants died, phytoplankton, zooplankton, so over time will die. So that water hyacinth will leave that whole ecosystem dead, and only that will flourish. And it happened to such a great extent that this name was given, the Bengal terror. And now it has even taken over a lot of natural water bodies as well. So there has to be efforts made to actively remove it from the water bodies, because it just grows like anything. It's like a cancer on the ponds. Okay, so this is also a problem when foreign species come and invade. So there is this another person, and you will find about this person here in your uh, textbook, David Tillman. So can you just read this paragraph for me?
Yeah.
You know,
David,
and
yes.
after reading, you have to explain me first what you understand. Then I will tell you.
Okay.
Yeah.
David Tillman's long-term ecosystem experiments using outdoor plots provide some tentative answers. Tillman found that plots with more species showed less year-to-year variation in total biomass. He also showed that in his experiments, increased diversity contributed to higher productivity. Although we may not understand completely how species richness contributes to the well-being of an ecosystem, we know enough to realize that rich biodiversity is not only essential for ecosystem health but imperative for the very survival of the human race on this planet. At a time when we are losing species at an alarming pace, one might ask, does it really matter to us if a few species become extinct? Would Western Ghats ecosystem be less functional if one of its tree frog species is lost forever? How is our quality of life affected if, say, instead of 20,000, we have only 15,000 species of ants on Earth?
Yeah. So these are the questions. To these questions, we have no um, fixed answer as of now. So that's what David Tillman did. So you understood what he did? Can you explain it to me in simple terms? You know,
So he's saying that mm, richness, like the biodiversity or the species richness is essential for maintaining the ecosystem health.
right. So this was the question that early scientists posed. Okay. So they asked, why is species diversity important to ecosystem? The same question that we are started with. If it is all about the proper flow of food and nutrients and everything, why can't there be just few species more in number and it should work? I don't see
Mm.
any reason why it should not work.
Can I give a
Like,
guess on this?
sorry?
Can I give a guess like what I understood from this?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
So like here it said right now, if a tree frog species is lost forever, how is it going to affect the ecosystem? So if like the frogs are lost, they completely vanished from that area. They're also feeding on some different things, like a different species are feeding for the frogs, so they will get affected, and then it just continues this way. So it will affect.
Hmm. Right.
And
So
about
what
the ants, I don't think so
mhm,
it's relevant because it doesn't really matter, right?
it does not matter for the whole ecosystem, you're thinking.
Yeah.
It's just one frog species gone. So how does it matter, right?
No, no. About the frog thing, I feel like it matters because some other species are feeding on the frog. So if they don't get the frog, they will get extinct, and
Uh-huh.
maybe it goes on this way.
Right. So for what you think it does not matter?
For the ants, it does not matter.
For ant species. So there are too many
Yeah,
ants. So if
yeah.
20,000 ants are there and 15,000 ants are left, it should not matter. Yeah. So these were the
No.
kind of questions that baffled scientists as well. So David Tillman just proved it experimentally. What he did, he took a plot, okay, and he showed that if the plot that he was taking care of had more species diversity, so he will plant um, more angiosperms, more fruit bearing trees. And then he started seeing that more birds and herbivores started coming and living in that plot. And then he started addressing what is the total biomass variation year to year annually. Yeah. And he realized that in the plot where there was more biodiversity, that plot had less year to year variation. But how? He didn't know. So he just proved that if you have more species richness, it contributes to well-being of an ecosystem. So basically, one thing going away matters. So even if it is ants, it matters according to his experiment. But the answer, how exactly it matters, was not known. And then some people came up with some hypothesis, and these are the two hypotheses that gives answers. So first, write down this question: why does species richness essential for ecosystem health? Hmm. Why is species richness? Because if it is not true, then what you are saying makes all the sense that it might matter for some organisms like a frog, but then we can let 10,000 species of ants just go extinct and it should not matter. And then the whole debate will start to identify which species matter and which species do not matter. But on the contrary, on the opposite, Tillman said every species matter. Okay. When it's a loss to biodiversity, and every loss impacts the health of the ecosystem. But he proved it. But the mechanistic answer, again, just like Darwin figured out that natural selection works and it is important, but he could not explain how exactly it works and how exactly it is important. Tillman's work also could not give concrete answers. So then recent of these answers come in this paragraph. Would you like to read the paragraph that I've highlighted? Yeah.
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 There's no direct answers to such native questions, but we can,
Naive,
uh,
not native, naive,
sorry,
naive. Yeah.
naive questions, but we can develop a proper perspective through an analogy. The Rivet Popper hypothesis, used by Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich. In an aeroplane ecosystem, all the parts are joined together using thousands of rivets species. If every passenger traveling in it starts popping a rivet to take home, causing a species to become extinct, it may not affect flight safety, proper functioning of the ecosystem initially, but as more and more rivets are removed, the plane becomes dangerously weak over a period of time. Furthermore, which rivet is removed may also be critical. Loss of rivets on the wings, key species that drive major ecosystem functions, is obviously a more serious threat to flight safety than loss of a few rivets on the seats or windows inside the plane.
Yeah. Did you understand that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So what you were
Means that,
saying, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
So it means basically that small species don't really matter, but somewhat they kind of affect the larger species also, and you know, if you kind of remove them all also, then it's going to be a threat to the ecosystem, like the
No,
major rivers.
yeah, no, but it also says that even if you take one rivet at a time, even if it's a small species, like you said, ants. So maybe from 20,000, if it is 19,000, it won't matter much. It will matter, but it will not affect the flight safety, you know. But at
Yeah,
one point of time, one more rivet and the whole thing collapses. You understand?
yeah,
So even if it is small species, it will take more time. So more number of them have to leave. So if there is no ant on the planet, we can't survive. We know that, right? But if
yeah.
out of 20,000, there are 15,000 there, only 5,000 are gone. Maybe for those 5,000, the existing 15,000 will take up their place and job, right?
Yeah.
But of course, if it is a predator who's gone, if tigers disappear, they are the most important part of the plane, like the landing gear. If they are gone, the whole jungle ecosystem collapses, right? Nothing to
Yeah.
keep a check on the consumers, like herbivores, and nothing to keep a check on the plants then,
Mhm.
right? So you are right that in some sense, what matters is where that species come in the hierarchy. And second thing that matters is how much loss we can bear. So if it is a predator species, even one species gone is a big loss. But if it is a ant species or a fly species or a mosquito species or a bee species, the effect will start showing up on the ecosystem when lots and lots of them are gone, right? So it is
Yes.
important that which species is getting extinct, but it's also important that even if it is small species, the number which is getting extinct. So
So
rivets are
these
small. Yeah, go ahead.
so these species are taken out through natural selection, right?
So species are formed through natural selection. Um, but when we are talking about extinction, that extinction is happening because of change in climate, loss of biodiversity. So if we are cutting on forest, so and making it agricultural fields, then we always start with the edge of the forest, right? Mostly when we cut down forest, you will not see that someone went to Amazon and right in the center of Amazon made an agricultural field. We start shortening the forest from the edges, correct?
Yeah.
So when we start shortening the edges, even in a forest ecosystem, it is designed in a way that you will see the kind of organisms and plants that live on the edge of the forest are slightly different from those who live in the heart of the forest. Okay. And
Yeah.
when we keep pushing the boundaries, we keep making the forest smaller and smaller, then they come in contact with humans, their agricultural fields. Okay. And agricultural fields cannot provide them with what they need. They're providing us with food, but they're not providing these species with what they need because we are clearing the native plants and we are growing, let's say, rice or wheat or maize or whatever. So these species either will come in direct conflict with humans, or they will try to move inwards in the forest. So what was not the edge now becomes the edge of the forest. Do you understand?
Yes.
And earlier, there was no clash because some species used to live in the edge and some in the interior. Now, both of them will collide because the interior is becoming the edge now. And because of collision, there will be selection. It will be a selection stress that whoever is fitter will survive. And then we will lose one species. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
And we keep doing that and we keep losing species. And that's where the Tillman's work come, that at one point of time, that whole ecosystem will crumble. It's just like you are taking one rivet out of the plane. At one point of time, either the wing will become too weak, or the landing gear will not work properly, and the whole plane will become non-functional. Okay, so this is what, write down the question: what is the rivet popper hypothesis? To explain what is the rivet popper hypothesis, and also who gave it sometimes. So remember Paul Ehrlich's name. To explain importance of species richness in ecosystems health. Importance of species richness in ecosystems health, or maintaining ecosystem. And then you have to write this paragraph that you just studied, just read. Is that okay, Iram?
Sure.
Okay, and then we'll take these two topics. There are two topics: loss, the cause of loss, what causes the loss of biodiversity. And some of these are pretty straightforward and general things like habitat loss, like we talked about. We are cutting down forests and making more agricultural lands, or making cities, urbanizing the space, over exploitation. So just read these things. So I'll take these two topics in the next class: loss of biodiversity and how can we conserve biodiversity.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next
Okay.
class we'll finish this chapter. Yeah.
It will
So
be done
I'll see you.
sessions, right?
Yeah, next class it will be done.
Okay.